There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Nathan Neudorf. I'm the Minister of Affordability and Utilities for the province of Alberta, and today I am pleased to announce that our government has introduced Bill 8, the Utility Statute Amendment Act 2025. The changes we're proposing through this bill will provide another option for our emerging AI data center sector to meet their energy needs, while protecting the reliability and affordability of the power that Albertans, businesses, and communities depend on. It's no secret that as our population and economy continue to grow, so does the demand for our electricity. Rapid advances in AI are playing no small role in that increased demand, as the use of ChatGPT, Google Gemini, and other AI apps are becoming more and more commonplace. In fact, a recent report for Amazon Web Services said that almost half of Albertan companies are consistently using AI, and that 9 in 10 Alberta companies believe AI will transform their sector by 2030. We are on the cusp of a technological revolution. Through this legislation, we are proposing changes that will help prepare and power Alberta to lead that revolution. Alberta has seen tremendous interest in data center developers who want to build in our province. We have the right resources, expertise, and business-friendly environment to be a destination of choice. We also have lower year-round cooling costs for the facilities because of our cooler northern climate. But we have also been clear from the start that our priority is the well-being of Albertans and the reliability of the power they depend on. This legislation helps provide data centers with another choice to meet their power needs. If passed, the Utility Statutes Amendment Act will pave the way for data centers to bring their own generation by encouraging data center developers to sign agreements directly with power generators to add power to our grid. Those that bring their own generation will be prioritized, accelerating the approval process and supporting their connection to the grid. This would help data centers meet their energy needs while preventing new projects from straining the grid's available supply. It will also ensure that ratepayers are not burdened with the cost of any power infrastructure upgrades needed for a data center project. Other proposed amendments will build on the critical updates introduced earlier this year to support the implementation of the restructured energy market and modernize our electricity system to be affordable, reliable, and sustainable now and for generations to come. This follows the completion of the final REM design and responds to hundreds of hours worth of engagement and valuable feedback from industry and stakeholders. I want to thank the ISO for their continued work, as well as all of those who have participated in the development of the restructured energy market. And because I know the media will ask, we anticipate the implementation of the restructured electricity or energy market to begin in the beginning of 2027. Amendments will also make updates to Alberta's electricity transmission policy and a number of other housekeeping items. There are a lot of exciting opportunities on the horizon. The advancement of innovative new technologies like AI will bring new industry, jobs, and economic growth to the province. A successful future depends on a utility system that keeps adapting to these changes. A system that is modern, efficient, and able to support traditional industry, emerging technologies, and the daily needs of Alberta families. If passed, the changes we're introducing today will move us closer to achieving the goal and keeping Alberta's utilities reliable, affordable, and sustainable. These are smart, forward-looking changes that build on Alberta's successes and ensure that our province has a bright, successful future. So thank you, and I now will turn things over to Aaron Engen, the President and CEO of Alberta's Electric Systems Operator.
Thank you, Minister Neudorf. Today's legislation sets a strong foundation for a modern and reliable and affordable grid while opening doors for an investment and potentially more importantly, innovation. Interest from large load energy users, especially data centers, is unprecedented, both in Alberta and across North America. In the past 18 months, the ISO has received over 19,000 megawatts of data center connection requests. And to put that in perspective, That's twice Alberta's current average electricity demand, and projects want to be connected as soon as possible. Our existing supply is adequate to meet Albertans' needs today and in the near term, but it cannot possibly serve all these requests without risking reliability. That's why we proceeded with a two-phase approach to connecting large loads. In phase one, we allocated 1,200 megawatts to data centers, which resulted in 2 large data centers receiving sufficient megawatts to proceed right away. For phase two, we've begun the development work of a long-term framework for integrating new large load electric customers like data centers, and Bill 8 will give us more flexibility in doing so. Bill 8 also paves the way for data centers to bring more net power to the power generation to the grid. The AESO is committed to working with industry and government to connect new data centers in a way that supports Alberta's strategy without putting the grid reliability at risk and or driving up costs for current customers. Now, switching to the restructured energy market. This modernized market will improve Alberta's wholesale electricity market in 3 key ways. First, new tools and reliability services to help ensure Albertans have access to electricity during peak demand, emergencies, or rapid system changes. 2, new pricing signals to bring new investments and compete with neighboring jurisdictions. And 3, locational pricing to make better use of the transmission system. These changes balance reliability, affordability, and competitiveness. This design, and the minister referred to this design reflects to the most comprehensive stakeholder consultation engagement the ISO has ever engaged in, with input from over 230 organizations across industries and across the province. Together, we're building an electricity system ready for Alberta's future, reliable, affordable, and open for an investment. Thank you, and I'll turn it back to the minister.
All right, so that concludes the formal part of today's announcements. We'll now move to a question and answer period. We will begin with questions in the room. If there are any.
Looking at all the new suite of changes that have been ushered in today, there's the levy on hardware, there's data center proponents have to build new transmission that's required, they have to bring their own power. I'm wondering, what's been your assessment of maintaining Alberta's competitiveness in this kind of environment? Like, what is stopping one of these data center proponents from looking at Alberta and saying, you know, this financially maybe doesn't make as much sense as we had hoped, despite the cheap natural gas we're going to build in Georgia or Virginia?
Great question, actually. I think we have a lot of natural benefits in Alberta that you already mentioned, the cooler climate, the low business tax, those kind of things. What we've also done through the entire structuring of the restructured energy market is to make sure that location matters. So when they know that ahead of time and utilize that for where they pick to do their data center, they can get the intersection of the best place for the resources needed, whether that's water or natural gas as fuel, transmission lines, and proximity to a workforce, that kind of thing. And that optimizes and makes efficient our whole grid. So it's not necessarily an additional cost to them up front if they know about it and they can locate well. What other jurisdictions are facing now is when they didn't consider that, these data centers built where they built, and there was a lot of additional costs that ratepayers had to bear. And then in retrospect, they have to try to make those adjustments and changes. And that's what's inhibiting them. Us doing this ahead of time, up front, gives them a clear line of sight, gives them long-term stability on those costs, and we are still competitive with all those parts and pieces.
And I was wondering, I know this is maybe you know, outside the scope of what we're talking about today, but another big piece, I mean, you talk about some of the jurisdictions in the United States that are facing, you know, huge pushback from populations there. I mean, one of their big sticking points is water, because the water demands of these things is quite intense. What are you hoping to see on that front when it comes to regulations in Alberta and kind of upfront, addressing that issue that could crop up with farmers or, people in rural Alberta?
Well, we have very strong guidelines and rules around water allocation and the usage of water. And right from the very beginning, we made sure that we included water as a resource, necessary resource for both power generation and potential cooling. That it's on the site locator map that we have helped build through Jobs, Economy, Trade, and Immigration. And again, because of that, location matters. So you can't go to an area, some of those in maybe southeastern Alberta, where the availability of water is not as prominent as in other region in central and northern Alberta. So again, we think that the rules are in place to govern how water is purchased, how it's used. And if companies know that ahead of time, before they make major investments, it's easier for them to pick the site that has the best availability to all the things that they need, including potentially water.
Go ahead.
My questions are actually for ISO.
Yeah, Mayor.
Sorry.
No, it's all right.
Okay, so last time we tried to count the number of connection requests, it was 231 in October. Do you have an update on that? And of those requests for connections, how many of those are self-powered?
So are you speaking in particular large load here? So there's 37,
Yes.
there's 37 large load applications in the grid,
Okay.
representing a little over 19,000 megawatts. And of those, as it stands today, 2 have connection contracts, connection agreements, where they can proceed with the megawatts we've allocated to them.
But how many are self-powered? Do they all require power from the grid?
Well,
Or any generation?
all at some point in time want to develop generation. You recall earlier on I talked about people wanting to get to market really quickly. That's why we did, in conjunction working with the government, decided let's find how many megawatts we can safely allocate to data centers, to large loads, without negatively impacting reliability on the grid, and then gave those 1,200. That's the starter kit to get those projects moving. Beyond that, and the minister's talked about this as well, in phase 2 we'll develop a framework where when folks come with their own generation, we'll be able to expedite, move them through the connection process more quickly.
I also have an ISO question, so you don't have to get up and down. How are you going to handle that required redundancy? I know one thing that's been talked about with data centers is, let's say they're a 400 megawatt data center, but they want to have 600 in the event that there's a power outage because they can't tolerate that. How's that going to work with the redundancy and excess power?
Sure. So all of the data center developers and their customers all tackle that question differently. There are some data center operators already in the province that when you go to their site, they'll have a small connection to the grid. I'll use 100 megawatts as an example. And then on site, they'll have some generation of their own. The one I'm thinking of in particular is gas-fired generation. And they also have some batteries on site as well. Some may be willing to have more risk and not have the batteries on site. Or some may be willing to have a different kind of risk and take batteries and not the gas-fired generation. So it's a little different for everybody. Our role is just simply to look at that connection with the transmission system and then determine how much is that going to impact the grid, is it going to impact reliability.
Can I have my follow-up?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Cat. So if you're telling me that some people, you're going to connect them, but then they have, designs to add their own power later, what qualifies them for this fast track or this separate stream of
It's bringing their own generation.
So they have to have it up front to
And
qualify?
that's a government policy. And you know both the minister and the premier has been talking about that almost from the get-go. We back when I was a teenager, we used to talk about BYOB. We all know what that means. Now we're talking about BYOG. I'm more mature. I don't do the same things I did when I was that age. So that's a really key part of that. And as we go through this framework, this framework work in phase 2, a big part of that work is how do we then determine, is it good enough for someone to show up and say, I'm coming with generation in 5 years? The answer is no. And Bill 8 and the work that the minister is doing is going to give us the flexibility to find ways to connect to the system without, again, negatively impacting reliability.
And if I can just jump in, this might be a helpful definition for all of you. There's grid connected for generation, where I think everybody understands you're connecting your power to the grid. There's behind the fence, which means that you own the generating asset and take that power first, but you are still connected to the grid, typically for redundancy and reliability. What often gets confused with behind a fence is off-grid, which means you build your own generation, you're islanded, there is no transmission connection. While that is sometimes thought of, that is not typically a reality. To be off-grid completely means you have to build all those levels of redundancy on your own. And typically, if you have wind and solar, and then batteries, and then natural gas generation, and then maybe diesel backup, by the time you build all of those to be truly off-grid and have the uptime, the runtime, the costs of that generation make that project economically unviable. So that's why you don't see that. Though there are some times where behind the fence or behind the meter and off-grid are confused with one another. So everything that we see in the queue with the ISO is grid connection, whether it's just direct and they just draw from the grid, or whether they have their own power and also connect to the grid for redundancy. So hopefully that's helpful. I think you had your second question.
Yeah, so I'm
Aaron might have to come back up here.
No, you can stay there, because it's sort of related to that, and it was related to Bill 12. So there's different tiers of this levy depending on whether they're fully powered by existing energy from the grid. They'll face a 2% levy. If they're connected to the grid but have a new power source, that's a 1% levy. And those who bring their own power will not face a levy. So I don't know, is there a risk here in being behind the fence but not totally own source? Can you sort of explain?
Certainly. So again, there's the most cost through that levy for those who are just coming to consume power off the grid. And that cost is paid into the government so that we can help manage and protect Albertans on their affordability and reliability. Then if you have your own power but are just connecting to the grid for redundancy, obviously your obligation is less, your use is less, and that's managed that way. And then the third scenario is that islanded off-grid connection, which we think is highly unlikely, but it is possible. So we wanted to, while we're creating legislation, to allow for that. Again, none of the projects that have applied to the ISO are seeking that islanded status.
Another question, if you don't mind. What do you think, if everything goes to plan and you've got these 37 applications, and this is purely hypothetical, obviously, but if everything goes to plan and they bring their own power generation and the transmission lines are being built out and everything's hunky-dory, there's no delays or anything, do you think that you've developed a system here where in a perfect world, all of these applications could eventually turn into real on-the-ground data centers that have their own power and that do not result in any kind of rate increases solely due to that demand on consumers?
Well, a couple things. One is I think it would be unlikely to get 100% of those projects built anyways. I think that's just normal. We understand that, right? You don't win every game you play. Nor would that necessarily be even technically possible within Alberta. That's an enormous amount of electricity. To give you some context, if all of those projects were to go ahead, it would be like adding 20 cities the size of Calgary into our grid. 20 times Calgary. I don't think that's possible, and nor should it be necessarily our goal. We want to get the right ones to be the right fit within Alberta, which is why we've added a significant responsibility to data centers as large load. They are definitely put in a place where if they're responsible, beneficial actors to Alberta, they will locate here. There's lots of natural resources here for them to do that. And if we get that right fit, I've always sort of looked at it as roughly a third of those, give or take. That would be a pretty big increase for us. That would represent, let's say, 5,000 megawatts, which is a 50% increase. I think it's doable, I think it's possible, and I think it's responsible. And then, as we've talked about, if they're building their own generation, they're also potentially going to be required through the regulations and further steps the ISO takes to provide some level of redundancy. Let's say, to Aaron's example, they're building a 100 megawatt data center and they decide to build 125 megawatt generation, providing 25% megawatts as redundancy to the grid. Only 4 of those would need to be built, and they've provided full redundancy for all of those projects, right? So there's some thinking to that as a good actor, they might be needed to build more than just what they consume, because there will be times where their own generation is off-grid, whether that's just regular scheduled maintenance, whether there's some sort of weather or other event that could cause an emergency situation. And we think that would be prudent. We don't want to make that barrier too high where it stops the economic viability, but certainly a little bit of that helps them reinforce not only their project, but every other project that comes to Alberta. So these are all considerations that we're working for. It's what we're enabling within this legislation, and we think it's a responsible path forward.
Okay, sorry, we're going to go to the phones because you've already had a couple questions now. Operator, please put through the first caller.
Your first question comes from the line of Anne McGraney from the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hey, thanks for taking my questions. Off the top there, Minister, you said that if this Bill 8 passes, it's going to pave the way for data centres to encourage them basically to, sign agreements directly with power generators to add power to grids. So if it is, though, that data centre proponents sign all these agreements, is there any worry then that power providers are going to look to that as the best way to make money, basically, and kind of look to that as a number one priority and therefore slack off in terms of just putting enough gigawatts on the grid to ensure that Albertans do have power?
Great question, Emma. No, we have conversations and rules in place to make sure that we don't have what's called grid defection, where currently you're providing megawatts to the grid within Alberta and say exactly what you said. Oh, wait, I can get a better price, so I'm not going to sell to the grid. I'm going to sell to a data center instead. We have rules in place. We have the must offer, must comply. That's why we have an Alberta Electric Systems operator to make sure that those kind of activities, behaviors don't take place. So we have those protections ready to go.
Great, thank you. And just as a follow-up there, obviously it takes a very long time to build a power plant. So is there anything in here in Bill 8 or even in your plans down the road to ramp up construction more generally on the grid?
Again, we have the unique private market within Alberta, and we have the supply-demand. What we're doing in this enabling legislation is to do exactly what you said earlier, that if a data center is coming with large load and that load isn't currently in Alberta, it is in their best interest to help accelerate that process by bringing that generation along. So we don't have that lag time, and we don't have the wild fluctuations in pricing, but we can, through these rules, allow the ISO to help set up the queue so that power is coming available right in time for those loads to need it. And we've seen that with the original 1,200 megawatt allocation. And now we see it further in phase 2 through Bill 8 and what it enables the industry and the ISO to do, and allows the private market for that supply to meet that demand in a very cooperative, collaborative way.
Operator, please put through the next caller, please.
Your next question comes from the line of Connor Hogg from CTV News. Please go ahead.
Hey, as the previous reporter was mentioning, it does take some time to build these facilities. Recently, Michael Burry, the founder of Scion Capital, as well as Albert Edwards, the Societe Generale analyst who predicted the dot-com bubble, have mentioned that there are concerns that an AI bubble could burst. Does the government share these same concerns?
No, because we don't have a public utility or a publicly owned system. This is private market, and that's why we encourage private proponents, both on the data center side and the generation side, to make their own agreements, almost negating that. So again, with the right processes and rules in place, those protections are there for Albertans, both as ratepayers and as taxpayers.
Fantastic. My follow-up is, if the worst-case scenario happens and there is an AI bubble that bursts, is the government concerned that there could be an orphan wells type scenario with these large-scale facilities that may just be left sitting there?
I don't believe so. I think the demand for artificial information, artificial intelligence and information is ever growing. I don't see a future where all of us don't have a phone or a computer in our pocket or our bag. So I don't think that's likely to be a need at all. I know the systems, just in the working and the management of the electricity grid itself, our ISO is utilizing more AI to help them in their day-to-day tasks and management. It is highly efficient. So I don't think so. Now, while investment bubbles may come and go on different technologies, again, the way we're setting this up, where proponents bring the power that they need to use and they set up those agreements, Alberta itself is quite insulated against those potential futures. And if there are market ups and downs like there is with every market, again, it is not the public purse that is holding that responsibility. It's private investment.
Okay, and we'll take the next caller.
Next question comes from the line of Alicia Fieldberg from CTV News Calgary. Please go ahead.
Minister Neudorf, just to switch gears here, what is your reaction to the recall petition against you?
I just defer you to my public comment. I'm here to talk about Bill 8 and ask you to go to Elections Alberta website for my comments.
Okay, follow up. Aside from the potential increase to the power grid, what is the expected financial benefit from these projects? Is it supposed to be mostly initially during construction, or how much will be coming from them paying for the actual power beyond?
The interesting opportunity that we have, again, through the transmission regulation updates that we've done and the continued work to make location matter, there is a huge potential upside for every single Albertan. Again, as I mentioned earlier, if you can imagine that one of these projects is using roughly the same amount of power as a city the size of Edmonton or the city the size of Calgary uses, well, think about how many individuals pay a significant portion of their bill towards transmission in those cities. Under the same rules and the same responsibilities for a data center to pay their share of the system on transmission, using the same grid that we currently have with very little new development required, we could see a large reduction in each and every Albertan's personal, business, and industrial bill on transmission, meaning that utilizing and optimizing the grid that we have is beneficial to all. So that's one of the hope-for outcomes of this is, again, good location can lower the cost of transmission, which is the single largest component of anybody's bill at this time.
Next caller, please.
Your next question comes from the line of Chris Varco from the Calgary Herald. Please go ahead.
I have a couple questions for Aaron. Aaron, can you explain to me what is the timing of the Phase 1 projects under the large load program that have already been approved? When do you expect them to be built, and when do you expect to have the Phase 2 rules in place?
So the Phase 1, the two projects are out there right now. You can look at our connection process on the website, and you see the timelines there. Outside dates right now stand at 2028. But they're all driving to do that much more quickly. It's not a target date. It's a done-by date sort of thing. In terms of Phase 2, we're going through consultation work. There's some work going on later this week. I'd expect that sometime early in the year, we'll start to get the feedback from stakeholders on what's the best way to approach this new framework. We'll be working with the minister and the department to figure out what we want to do, and I would expect we'll have more news for folks in the new year sometime.
Okay, just as a follow-up question, from ISO's perspective, what is your biggest concern about a data center development in Alberta? There's obviously a number of projects that are all in the queue and have all got into the queue over the last 18 months. But what is your biggest concern moving forward?
Well, because we're responsible for reliability, my greatest concern is that these things don't create reliability challenges because they don't bring their own generation. The Premier, the Minister, the government has tackled that problem for us. And then the second thing that we're looking across is we've been looking at other jurisdictions. The Minister talked about this as well. We've been looking across North America to see what experiences others have had. And this is one of the advantages of not being the first one in the door. We're second or third in the door, still early days, but we're able to benefit from the experience of other system operators across North America. So I get very focused on the connection specifications. And we're dealing with all of the data center, all of the large load folks right now on those particular, and they're very engineering, propeller head kinds of requirements, but they're vital to making sure that the grid is stable and reliable. Net, at the end of the day, we see some net new generation to the grid. That's positive for the supply in the province. It's positive for reliability. This is the kind of generation we like to see because it keeps the system stable. And even more importantly, having new large load showing up reduces the cost of transmission for all of us.
And we'll take one more caller from the phones.
We don't have any further questions on the phone lines as of the moment. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take one more for Janet.
Now I got so excited I've forgotten. Actually, they're for Aaron. I'm sorry. I'm going to make you get up and down. Sorry, not sorry. So,
it's good exercise.
The phase 2, do you have a megawatt number or gigawatt? Or like, do you have a goal? Of
No, this is, so phase 2 is very different from phase 1. Phase 1 was just looking at the grid and saying, how much can we effectively free up? And then get that piece going. This now ends up being just the framework for connecting new large loads going forward. It could be 2,000. It could be a quarter, a third of the 19,000. It would be some number at the end of the day. But we don't have to worry about a cap. And the reason we have to worry about a cap is because, as the Premier, the Minister, and others have talked to the government, this is about BYOG. And once you bring that generation with you, I'm far less concerned about negative impacts on the grid, as long as we get the connection requirements straight.
So does phase 2 have to be BYOG for you to qualify for that?
Essentially, they will be prioritized, yes. Now,
But not essential.
not essentially, because we have a private market. So if there's a generator that doesn't happen to be approached by a data center and just wants to build generation and add that to the grid, if there are peaker plants, which we're aware of very many, wanting to firm existing renewables assets, our surplus or our firm surplus grows. And they can make the regular application process to the ISO, and should they qualify in all the other requirements, they could just connect to the grid under not bringing your own. But at this point in time, there is definitely a prioritization for those that do bring their own. And for those that don't, they are still more than welcome to come to Alberta, wait in the queue, and when that generation surplus is available, they can connect.
Super quick clarification. Earlier you said you envisioned maybe 5,000 megawatts being added, so about a third of or half of our current capacity. So what's your timeline for that?
Again, that is up to the private industry for those that apply and move forward and make applications. It is for the supply to meet the demand in terms of generators. And other than the ISO and the AUC regulatory process where they have to qualify for all of the other things they have to qualify for, we can see this moving ahead very quickly. So thank you very much.
All right, and that concludes our press conference today. Thank you for attending, and if you have any further questions, my contact information is at the bottom of the press release. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much.